The tension before the storm. The press conference room at Mar-a-Lago was electric, buzzing with the anticipation that often preceded a major announcement. Journalists adjusted their cameras, whispered amongst themselves, and prepared for what they hoped would be the headline of the day. Melania Trump, poised and composed, sat behind the microphone. Her elegant demeanor and practiced calm exuded control, even as the atmosphere around her bristled with curiosity and a faint sense of confrontation. It wasn't the first time she had faced reporters, but today was different. There was an unspoken undercurrent in the room, an edge of boldness from a press eager to pry into her family's personal life. Melania's sharp instincts, honed over years in the public eye, told her this wasn't going to be an ordinary exchange. A booming voice cut through the din. "Mrs. Trump, can you comment on the rumors about Barron's supposed support for LGBTQ+ rights and how that aligns with your family's values?" The room collectively held its breath. For a brief moment, Melania's serene expression faltered, and a flicker of something unspoken passed over her face. Her youngest child, Barron, had always been fiercely protected from the public eye. At 18, he was a young man navigating the complexities of growing up under the world's scrutiny. Melania had always shielded him from the storm, ensuring that his life remained as private as possible. But now, the protective walls she and Donald had painstakingly built seemed to be cracking. She took a deep breath, the weight of the room's attention pressing heavily on her. "Barron is 18, she began, her tone measured yet firm. "He carries himself with integrity, just as his father and I raised him to. The truth is, our family stands united. We respect all individuals, but we hold firmly to our beliefs." The reporters leaned in, sensing an unexpected narrative. Melania wasn't done. "As parents, we teach our children the importance of respect, no matter the differences," she continued, her voice softening. Her Slovenian accent added an unexpected layer of sincerity to her words. "But we also guide them with the values we hold dear. This is not a contradiction. It is love." Her words hung in the air like a delicate but unbreakable thread. The room, often a battleground of rapid-fire questions and aggressive posturing, fell silent. Melania had answered with a grace that was both disarming and profound. From the back of the room, Barron Trump watched his mother with a mix of pride and discomfort. He hated the spotlight, the constant scrutiny, and the endless speculation about his family, but he admired her courage. His mother's unwavering poise was something he had always respected, even as he grappled with the weight of being her son. Donald Trump stood off stage, his expression unreadable. Arms crossed tightly, his piercing gaze never left Melania. His silence spoke volumes. It was his way of saying, "I'm here, and you've got this." The tension in the room reached a new peak when another journalist dared to raise a follow-up question. "What about the accusations of hypocrisy, Mrs. Trump?" Before Melania could respond, the door to the side of the stage swung open. Donald Trump strode in, his presence commanding instant attention. Gasps rippled through the room as he took his place beside his wife, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "Let me make one thing clear," Donald began, his voice booming with conviction. "Our family has been the target of lies and smears for years. This," he gestured to the reporters, "is just another attempt to twist the truth." He turned to the journalist who had asked the question, his gaze unrelenting. "Barron is a young man who respects everyone but doesn't compromise on his beliefs. Just like his mother said, we raised him to have values and stand by them. So let's stop dragging an innocent teenager into your agendas." The room was still. For a brief moment, even the most hardened journalists were stunned into silence. Melania's eyes glistened, but she held back tears. Donald's words were more than just a defense. They were a declaration of solidarity, a reminder of the fierce loyalty that had always defined their family. As the press conference concluded, Melania and Donald walked off the stage together, their unity unshaken. But Melania knew this was just the beginning. The storm was far from over. Later that evening, back at the Trump residence, the atmosphere was heavy. The press conference had ended, but the ripple effects were already starting to take shape. Melania sat in the living room, a warm cup of tea cradled in her hands. She stared out the window at the palm trees swaying gently in the night breeze, her mind racing. Barron paced near the window, peering out at the Secret Service agents patrolling the grounds. His face was tense, his shoulders stiff with unspoken frustration. "Mom," he began, his voice low but steady, "why did they have to bring me into this? I've stayed out of the spotlight for a reason." Melania set her tea down and crossed the room to stand beside him, placing a hand on his arm. She looked up at her son, her expression one of quiet strength. "Because you are strong, Barron," she said softly. "They know you represent something they cannot control, but you must not let their words hurt you. You know who you are." Before Barron could respond, Donald entered the room, his tie loosened and his expression uncharacteristically weary. "They're going to spin this into something bigger," he said, his voice tinged with frustration. "But we'll handle it, as we always do." Barron turned to face his father, his brow furrowed. "Dad, I don't care what they say about me. I care about how this affects you and Mom. I don't want to be a problem." Barron ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that betrayed his inner turmoil. "It's not that simple, Mom. People don't want to see the real me. They want a story, a scandal, a headline. They don't care about who I actually am." Melania rose from her chair and walked over to her son, placing a hand on his arm. "You're wrong, Barron. People are desperate for authenticity, for hope, and you have the power to give them that." Barron sighed, his gaze dropping to the floor. He respected his mother deeply, but the idea of exposing himself to even more public scrutiny felt overwhelming. Before he could respond, Donald stood up, his towering presence commanding the room. "This isn't just about Barron," he said firmly. "It's about all of us. The media wants to divide us, to exploit any perceived weakness, but they don't understand that our strength comes from our unity." He turned to his son, his voice softening. "You've got a good heart, Barron, and if your mother believes this is the right move, then I trust her judgment." Barron nodded reluctantly, the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. "Fine," he said quietly. "I'll think about it." That evening, Melania and Donald sat in the library, discussing how to approach the delicate situation. The room, lined with leather-bound books and illuminated by a soft, golden glow, felt like a sanctuary from the chaos outside. Ivanka suggested starting with something simple. Melania said, her fingers tracing the edge of her teacup. "A charitable event, perhaps, something that highlights Barron's interests." Donald leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "What are his interests? I mean, what does he really care about?" "Technology," Melania replied without hesitation. "He's always been fascinated by coding, artificial intelligence, and innovation. He spent hours teaching himself, building things. It's something he's passionate about." Donald considered this for a moment, then nodded. "That's good. We can work with that." Melania hesitated before speaking again. "There's a program in New York that focuses on teaching underprivileged kids how to code. I've looked into it before. If Barron were to get involved, it could send a powerful message." Donald raised an eyebrow. "A message about what?" Melania met his gaze steadily. "About using privilege for good, about giving back, and about breaking the narrative that our family is out of touch." Donald leaned back in his chair, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You've thought this through." "I've had to," Melania replied simply. The next day, Melania approached Barron with the idea. They sat in the garden, the Florida sun casting dappled shadows over the lush greenery. For a moment, it was easy to forget the storm brewing beyond the gates. "I've been thinking about what we discussed," Melania began, her tone gentle. "There's a program in New York that teaches kids how to code. They could use someone like you, a mentor, a role model." Barron frowned, his hands fidgeting in his lap. "I'm not a role model, Mom. I'm just me." "And that's exactly why you'd be perfect," Melania said, her voice filled with quiet conviction. You don't have to pretend to be someone you're not. You just have to show them who you are. Barron was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Finally, he nodded. Okay, he said softly. I'll do it. Melania smiled, a sense of relief washing over her. You're braver than you think, Barron. The first step was a private visit to the program's headquarters. Melania insisted on keeping it low-key. No cameras, no reporters, just Barron meeting the kids and learning about the work being done. As they walked through the facility, Barron's initial apprehension began to fade. He watched as kids, some as young as 8, eagerly showcase their projects. Their enthusiasm was infectious, and for the first time in a long while, Barron felt a genuine sense of purpose. One boy, no older than 10, approached him hesitantly. Are you really Barron Trump? He asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. Barron crouched down to the boy's level and smiled. Yeah, that's me. The boy grinned. Can you help me with my code? It's not working. Of course, Barron replied, sitting beside the boy and diving into the problem. For the next hour, he worked with the kids, helping them debug their projects and answering their questions. By the end of the visit, he was laughing and joking with them, his usual guarded demeanor replaced by a genuine warmth. Melania watched from a distance, her heart swelling with pride. This was the Barron she knew, the thoughtful, kind, and intelligent young man the world had yet to see. As they drove back to Mar-a-Lago, Barron turned to his mother. You were right, he said quietly. It felt good to be there, to help. Melania reached over and squeezed his hand. The world will always have its opinions, Barron. But what matters is the difference you make. Barron nodded, a newfound determination shining in his eyes. For the first time, he felt ready to step out of the shadows, not for the headlines, but for himself. The storm was far from over, but for the Trumps, it was a fight they were prepared to face together. Navigating the crossroads of public perception. The sun cast a golden hue over the Manhattan skyline as the Trump family's private jet touched down at LaGuardia Airport. Barron gazed out the window, his reflection overlaying the bustling city below. New York had always been a city of contradictions for him, a place of both anonymity and intense scrutiny. This time, however, he was arriving with a purpose that went beyond family obligations or media appearances. As they drove toward the heart of the city, Melania observed her son carefully. Barron's usually stoic demeanor was tinged with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. She reached over and placed a reassuring hand on his. Remember, today is about making a difference, no matter how small it may seem, she said softly. Barron nodded, his eyes never leaving the window. I know, Mom. I just hope it goes well. The car pulled up to the modest building that housed the coding program's main offices. Unlike the opulence he was accustomed to, the facility was understated. A converted warehouse with a simple sign that read Code Future Initiative. A group of children stood outside, their excited chatter filling the air. As Barron stepped out of the car, their eyes widened, and whispers spread through the group. Inside, the atmosphere was vibrant. Computers lined long tables, and colorful posters of inspirational figures adorned the walls. The program's director, a woman named Maya Rodriguez, greeted them warmly. With a firm handshake and a welcoming smile, she said, "We're thrilled to have you here, Barron. The kids have been eagerly awaiting your visit." Barron returned her smile, albeit a bit shyly. "Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here." They began with a tour of the facility. Maya explained how the program aimed to bridge the technological divide by providing resources and education to underprivileged youth. "We believe that coding isn't just about computers," she said passionately. "It's about problem solving, creativity, and giving these kids a voice in a digital world." As they walked through the rows of engaged students, Barron felt a sense of belonging he hadn't anticipated. He stopped to observe a girl meticulously adjusting lines of code on her screen. Noticing his interest, she looked up. "Do you know Python?" she asked bluntly. Barron chuckled. A bit. Need some help? She nodded eagerly. My game keeps crashing, and I can't figure out why. Pulling up a chair, Barron delved into the code with her. They worked side by side, debugging and discussing different approaches. Melania watched from a distance, her heart swelling as she saw her son connect so effortlessly. Hours passed unnoticed. Barron moved from student to student, offering guidance, sharing his own experiences, and listening to their stories. He learned about their dreams, to build apps that would help their communities, to create games that told their stories, to use technology to make a difference. By the end of the day, the initial formality had dissolved into camaraderie. The kids gathered around Barron, peppering him with questions about his life, his interests, and even his favorite video games. One boy raised his hand hesitantly. "What's it like being a Trump?" he asked. Barron paused, considering the question carefully. "It's complicated," he admitted, "but days like today make it easier. Being able to connect with people who share my interests reminds me that we're all more alike than we are different." The candid response resonated with the group. Maya approached, placing a hand on Barron's shoulder. "You've made quite an impact today," she said. "The kids don't often get to see someone from your background taking an interest in them." Barron smiled modestly. "They've impacted me just as much. I'd like to come back, if that's okay." "You're welcome anytime," Maya replied warmly. The following morning, headlines began to surface about Barron's visit. Photos of him interacting with the students circulated on social media, many accompanied by positive comments praising his engagement. However, not all reactions were favorable. Certain media outlets questioned the authenticity of his involvement, suggesting it was a calculated move to improve the family's image. In the Trump Tower penthouse, the family gathered to assess the unfolding situation. Screens displayed a mix of news reports, social media feeds, and opinion pieces. Ivanka, always the strategist, tapped her pen thoughtfully against her notebook. "The public response is mixed, but that's to be expected," she said. "What's important is that the narrative is shifting." Donald paced the room, his frustration evident. "They'll twist anything to suit their agenda," he grumbled. "Barron does something good, and they still find a way to criticize." Barron sat quietly, absorbing the whirlwind around him. "Maybe you're right," he said softly. Melania turned to him, concern etched on her face. "What do you mean?" "Maybe it does look like a PR stunt," he continued. "I don't want the kids at the program to get caught up in this." Ivanka leaned forward. "Barron, the authenticity of your actions shines through. The people who matter can see that. The others are just noise." He looked up, meeting his sister's gaze. "Then what should I do?" "Keep going," she replied firmly. "Stay involved. Let your continued actions speak louder than any headline." Over the next few weeks, Barron immersed himself in the Code Future initiative. He attended workshops, collaborated on projects, and even helped organize a hackathon aimed at solving local community issues. Each visit deepened his connection to the program and the students. The media attention persisted, but as time went on, the narrative began to evolve. Stories emerged highlighting the tangible impact of Barron's involvement. Interviews with students and staff painted a picture of genuine engagement and mutual inspiration. One evening, as Barron reviewed code for a student's app, he received a notification on his phone. It was an email from a renowned tech magazine requesting an interview to discuss his work with the initiative. Hesitant, he brought it to his mother. "Do you think I should do it?" he asked. Melania read the email thoughtfully. "This could be an opportunity to amplify the program's mission," she said. "But it's your decision." He considered her words. "I want to focus on the work, not the publicity." "I understand," she replied. "But sometimes sharing your story can inspire others to get involved." After a moment's contemplation, Barron nodded. "Okay, I'll do it, but only if the focus is on the initiative, not me." The interview was scheduled at the program's facility. The journalist, a tech correspondent named Daniel Harper, arrived with a small crew. From the outset, Barron made it clear that he wanted Maya and some of the students involved in the conversation. As the cameras rolled, Daniel began, "Barron, your involvement here has garnered significant attention. Can you tell us what drew you to the Code Future initiative?" Barron glanced at Maya before responding. "I was looking for a way to use my interest in technology to make a positive impact. When I learned about this program, I saw an opportunity to support and learn from these incredible students." Daniel nodded. "Many might assume that someone in your position wouldn't relate to the challenges these kids face. How do you bridge that gap?" "By listening," Barron replied earnestly. "Technology is a universal language. When we're coding together, backgrounds and differences fade away. We're just people collaborating on ideas." The interview continued, highlighting success stories from the program and delving into the students' aspirations. One student, a young girl named Aisha, spoke passionately about her project, a mobile app designed to help local businesses streamline their services. "Barron encouraged me to think bigger," she said. "He didn't just help with the coding. He made me believe that my ideas could make a real difference." The piece aired a week later and was met with overwhelming positivity. It showcased not just Barron's involvement, but the transformative power of the program itself. Donations and support began pouring in, allowing the initiative to expand its reach. Back at Mar-a-Lago, the family watched the interview together. As it concluded, a rare moment of collective silence filled the room. Donald broke it with a proud smile. "You did good, son." Barron felt a swell of emotion. "Thanks, Dad." Melania placed a hand over his. "We're proud of you, Barron. Not for the attention this has brought, but for the lives you're touching." He looked around at his family, each member strong-willed and complex in their own way. For the first time, he felt like he had carved out his own place within it, not defined by the family name but by his own actions. However, the newfound positivity did not go unnoticed by critics. A prominent political commentator published an op-ed questioning the long-term intentions behind Barron's involvement, insinuating that it was a strategic move for future political aspirations. The article circulated rapidly, reigniting debates across media platforms. Discussions ranged from skepticism about the sincerity of the Trump's philanthropy to conspiracy theories about grooming Barron for a political role. Barron, upon reading the article, felt a familiar weight settle over him. Despite his efforts, the shadow of public scrutiny remained ever present. He retreated to his room, seeking solace in the familiarity of his own space. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "May I come in?" Melania's voice was gentle. "Yeah," he replied softly. She entered, closing the door behind her. "I saw the article," she said, sitting beside him. "It's like no matter what I do, it gets twisted," he said, frustration edging his voice. Melania sighed. "Unfortunately, that's part of living under the public eye, but you can't let it deter you from doing what's right." He looked at her, a question lingering in his eyes. "Is it worth it?" She smiled sadly. "That's something only you can decide. But remember, the impact you've made on those kids is real. No article can take that away." He considered her words. "I just wish things were different." "I know," she replied, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "But often, the most meaningful paths are the hardest to walk." Determined not to let negativity overshadow his efforts, Barron returned to the program with renewed vigor. He proposed a new initiative, a scholarship fund to help graduates of the program pursue higher education in technology fields. Collaborating with Maya and other supporters, they began laying the groundwork. Word of the scholarship fund attracted attention from tech industry leaders. Invitations to speak at conferences and participate in panel discussions began to arrive. Barron was cautious, but with encouragement from his family and the program, he accepted selective opportunities that aligned with his mission. At a technology summit in Silicon Valley, Barron took the stage alongside industry pioneers. The audience was a mix of skepticism and curiosity. He spoke not as a Trump, but as a young advocate for technological empowerment. Access to technology and education should not be a privilege but a right, he asserted. The innovations of tomorrow depend on the inclusivity of today. His speech was met with a standing ovation. Industry blogs and tech journalists praised his vision and authenticity. The narrative was shifting once again, this time with a momentum that felt sustainable. Back home, the atmosphere was lighter. The family gathered for dinner, a rare occasion given their varied schedules. Laughter and stories filled the air, a semblance of normalcy that was often elusive. Donald raised his glass. To Barron, for making his mark on the world in his own way. Here, echoed around the table. Barron felt a flush of embarrassment, but also a deep sense of belonging. I couldn't have done any of it without your support, he said sincerely. As the evening wound down, Barron found himself alone on the balcony, gazing out at the starlit sky. Melania joined him, the silence between them comfortable. You've grown so much, she said softly. I'm proud of the man you're becoming. He smiled. I had good guidance. She looked at him thoughtfully. What's next for you? He took a deep breath. I don't know exactly, but I want to continue this work, maybe even expand it globally. She nodded approvingly. The world could use more people who think like you. They stood together in quiet contemplation, the challenges of the past months fading into the background. For the first time in a long while, Barron felt a sense of clarity about his path forward. The road ahead would undoubtedly have its obstacles, scrutiny, criticism, and the ever-present weight of his family name. But he now understood that his identity was not confined by the perceptions of others. It was something he could shape through his actions, his choices, and his commitment to making a difference. As the night enveloped them, Barron felt a quiet determination settle within him. The crossroads of public perception and personal conviction were difficult to navigate, but he was no longer walking the path alone. With his family's support and his own resolve, he was ready to face whatever came next. The price of visibility. The Trump family estate in Palm Beach was quiet, a stark contrast to the media frenzy brewing outside its gates. Barron sat in the study, his laptop open in front of him, lines of code filling the screen. Programming had always been his refuge, a way to escape the noise of the outside world. But lately, even that sanctuary felt invaded. Since his involvement with the Code Future initiative, Barron's life had changed in ways he hadn't anticipated. What began as a sincere effort to make a difference had spiraled into a spectacle of scrutiny. Supporters hailed him as a beacon of hope, while critics painted him as a pawn in a larger game. Every step he took seemed to invite both admiration and condemnation. Melania entered the room, carrying a tray with 2 cups of tea. Setting it down on the desk, she studied her son. His shoulders were tense, his usually calm demeanor tinged with frustration. You're still working? She asked gently. Barron nodded, not looking up. It's the only thing that makes sense right now. Melania sat down across from him, her expression thoughtful. You've been quieter than usual. What's on your mind? He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. It feels like no matter what I do, it's never enough. The more I try to help, the more people question my intentions. It's exhausting. Melania reached for his hand, her touch comforting. The world can be harsh, especially when you carry the Trump name. But that doesn't mean your efforts are in vain. The children you've helped, the lives you've touched, that's real. Don't let the noise drown out the good. Barron sighed, his gaze fixed on the floor. I just didn't think it would be this hard. It's always hard to do the right thing, Melania said softly. But that's what makes it worth it. The next morning, Barron was jolted awake by the sound of his phone buzzing incessantly. Groggy, he reached for it, only to be greeted by a flood of notifications. Articles, tweets, and messages all pointed to the same headline. Barron Trump, the next face of political ambition. He groaned, scrolling through the content. The piece was speculative, weaving together threads of his recent public appearances to suggest that he was being groomed for a future in politics. It was accompanied by a grainy photo of him leaving the Code Future initiative, a tired smile on his face as he waved to the students. Frustrated, he threw his phone onto the bed and buried his face in his hands. The last thing he wanted was to be seen as a political tool. He had joined the initiative because it mattered to him, not because it aligned with some grand family strategy. Melania knocked on the door before stepping in, holding her phone. Her expression was calm, but her eyes betrayed concern. "I saw the article," she said. "Of course you did," Barron replied, his voice muffled. "It's everywhere." Melania sat on the edge of the bed. "People will always speculate. It's part of living in our world." "I hate it," Barron said, looking up. "I hate that everything I do gets turned into some kind of agenda." Melania placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then let your actions speak louder than their words. The more you focus on what truly matters, the less power their speculation will hold." That afternoon, Barron attended a meeting with the Code Future Initiative's board of directors. They were thrilled with the attention his involvement had brought to the program, but there was an underlying tension in the room. Maya, the program's director, addressed it directly. "Barron, we're incredibly grateful for everything you've done," she began. "But the increased media attention has made things complicated. Some of our donors are hesitant about the controversy surrounding your name." Barron frowned. "What kind of controversy?" Maya hesitated. "There's a narrative being pushed that your involvement is part of a larger political strategy. Some donors are concerned it could overshadow the program's mission." Barron sat back in his chair, the weight of her words sinking in. "So, what are you saying? That I should step back?" "No," Maya said quickly. "I think your passion and dedication are genuine, and the students feel the same. But we need to be mindful of how we navigate this situation." He nodded, his mind racing. He had never considered that his presence could become a liability. The thought unsettled him deeply. Later that evening, Barron sought refuge in the estate's garden. The cool night air and the sound of rustling leaves offered a semblance of peace. He sat on a stone bench, staring up at the stars, lost in thought. Donald joined him, a glass of scotch in hand. He sat down beside his son, the two of them enveloped in comfortable silence. "Mom told you, didn't she?" Barron finally asked. Donald took a sip of his drink before responding. "She did, and I read the article myself." Barron let out a bitter laugh. "What did you think?" Donald shrugged. "I think people will always talk. It's what they do. But you can't let that stop you from doing what's right." "That's what everyone keeps saying," Barron muttered. "But what if doing what's right makes things worse for the people I'm trying to help?" Donald turned to face his son, his expression uncharacteristically serious. "Listen to me, Barron. The only way to avoid criticism is to do nothing. And that's not who we are. You've got a good heart. And that's why this matters. Let them talk. Prove them wrong by staying the course." Barron looked at his father, surprised by the sincerity in his words. "It's not that simple." "Nothing worth doing ever is," Donald replied. "But I've learned one thing in this life. You can't control what people say. You can only control how you respond." Inspired but still uncertain, Barron decided to address the situation head-on. He requested a meeting with Maya and the board, determined to find a way forward. When they gathered in the conference room, he spoke candidly. "I understand the concerns about the media attention," he began, "but stepping back isn't the answer. If anything, it would only validate their narrative. I believe in this program and its mission, and I'm committed to seeing it succeed." He paused, glancing around the room. "That being said, I don't want my presence to overshadow the amazing work being done here. So I propose a compromise. Let's focus on the students, their stories, their achievements. Let's make them the face of the initiative." Maya smiled, a look of relief washing over her. "I think that's a brilliant idea." The board members nodded in agreement, and the tension in the room eased. Barron felt a sense of purpose reignite within him. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he was regaining control of the narrative. Over the next few weeks, the program shifted its focus. Media campaigns highlighted the students' successes, showcasing their projects and the transformative impact of the initiative. Barron continued to work behind the scenes, mentoring students and helping organize events, but he deliberately stepped out of the spotlight. The strategy paid off. Public perception began to shift as the program's accomplishments took center stage. Donations increased, allowing the initiative to expand to new cities. The noise surrounding Barron's involvement gradually faded, replaced by a genuine appreciation for the work being done. One evening, as Barron reviewed a student's code, Maya approached him with a smile. "You've handled this with more grace than most adults would," she said. He chuckled. "I had a lot of help." Maya's expression turned serious. "You've made a real difference here, Barron. Don't ever doubt that." He nodded, her words settling deep in his heart. The journey had been more challenging than he'd ever imagined, but it had also been profoundly rewarding. As he walked out of the facility that night, the city lights twinkling in the distance, Barron felt a newfound sense of peace. The road ahead would undoubtedly have its challenges, but for the first time, he felt ready to face them. He wasn't just a Trump. He was Barron, a young man determined to forge his own path and make a lasting impact. The ripple effect. The days following the program's refocused media strategy brought a rare calm to Barron's life. The public's attention shifted from him to the students whose stories truly deserved the spotlight. Their innovative projects and heartfelt testimonies were featured in news articles and television segments, sparking a wave of inspiration across the nation. For the first time in weeks, Barron felt like the storm was beginning to subside. But the tranquility was short-lived. One morning, as Barron worked on a scholarship proposal for the program, Melania entered his room, her face clouded with concern. She held a tablet displaying the headline of an article that had just gone viral. Barron Trump's Secret Agenda: How the Initiative Connects to a Shadowy Political Network. Barron groaned, running a hand through his hair. "What now?" Melania set the tablet down on his desk. "They're claiming that the initiative is a front for advancing political influence. They've tied it to donors who support your father." He skimmed the article, his frustration mounting with each paragraph. It was filled with baseless accusations and speculative connections, but the tone was calculated to sow doubt. It questioned the program's integrity and implied that Barron's involvement was a carefully orchestrated ploy. "This is insane," Barron muttered. "None of this is true." Melania placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We know that, but the public doesn't. How we respond to this will be critical." That evening, the Trump family gathered in the estate's dining room to discuss their next steps. Donald paced the floor, his signature scowl firmly in place. Ivanka sat beside Melania, her notebook open and pen poised, ready to strategize. "They're grasping at straws," Donald said, his voice tinged with frustration. "But that doesn't mean we can ignore it. Perception matters." Ivanka nodded. "We need to address this head-on. A statement isn't enough. We need transparency. Let's invite journalists to visit the program. Let them see the work being done firsthand." Barron, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. "I'll do it," he said firmly. "I'll talk to them, answer their questions. If they see my commitment in person, maybe they'll stop doubting my intentions." Donald looked at his son, his expression softening. "Are you sure about this, Barron? Once you open that door, there's no closing it." "I'm sure," Barron replied. "If I don't defend the program, who will?" The following week, a group of journalists arrived at the Code Future initiative. Cameras flashed as they were greeted by Maya, Barron, and a few of the students. The atmosphere was tense, but Barron maintained his composure, determined to present the truth. The tour began in the main classroom, where students were engrossed in their projects. Maya explained the program's mission and its impact, emphasizing that it was entirely funded by donations from a diverse group of supporters. Barron chimed in. sharing his personal journey and why he had chosen to become involved. One journalist, a sharp-eyed woman named Rachel Ward, asked pointedly, "How do you respond to claims that your involvement is politically motivated?" Barron met her gaze, his voice steady. "I understand why people might think that, given my family's background. But the truth is, I'm here because I believe in what this program stands for. These kids are the future, and they deserve every opportunity to succeed. That's all there is to it." Another journalist raised a hand. "What about the alleged ties to your father's political network?" Maya stepped in, her tone firm. "The initiative's donors come from all walks of life. This program is about education and empowerment, not politics. We've always been transparent about our funding, and we're happy to provide financial records to prove it." The journalists seemed intrigued, but not entirely convinced. The turning point came when they interviewed the students themselves. Their stories of overcoming adversity, discovering their passions, and building confidence through coding painted a picture that no amount of speculation could tarnish. One student, a shy boy named Marcus, spoke about how the program had changed his life. "Before this, I didn't think I was good at anything," he said. "But now I'm building apps and solving problems. Barron helped me see that I could do it." The authenticity of the students' voices began to shift the narrative. By the end of the visit, even the most skeptical journalists seemed moved. The articles that followed were markedly different from the ones that had come before. Headlines like "Inside the Code Future Initiative," "A program changing lives," replaced the accusatory rhetoric of the past. The coverage highlighted the program's successes and Barron's genuine dedication, finally putting to rest many of the doubts surrounding his involvement. At home, the family celebrated the positive shift in public perception. Donald clapped Barron on the back, a rare smile on his face. "You handled yourself like a pro, son. I'm proud of you." Barron felt a surge of relief, but also a lingering weariness. The journey had been grueling, and he knew the scrutiny wasn't over. Still, the experience had taught him the value of persistence and authenticity. In the weeks that followed, the program continued to grow. The scholarship fund Barron had proposed was officially launched, providing financial support to students pursuing higher education in technology. Corporate partnerships began to form, offering internships and job opportunities to program graduates. Barron also took on a more active role in shaping the initiative's future. He proposed expanding the curriculum to include emerging fields like artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, ensuring that the students were equipped for the challenges of tomorrow. One day, as he worked on a proposal for the new curriculum, Melania entered his room with a letter in her hand. "This came for you," she said, handing it to him. Barron opened the envelope and began reading. It was from Marcus, the shy boy who had spoken to the journalists. In neat handwriting, he had written, "Dear Barron, thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Because of you and the program, I'm applying to college to study computer science. I hope one day I can make a difference like you have. Sincerely, Marcus." Barron felt a lump form in his throat as he read the words. He handed the letter to Melania, who smiled softly. "This is why you do what you do," she said. He nodded, a sense of clarity washing over him. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but letters like Marcus reminded him of the ripple effect of his actions. For every critic, there were countless lives being changed, an impact that no headline could diminish. Barron folded the letter carefully and placed it in his desk drawer. It was a reminder of the journey he had embarked on, the struggles he had faced, and the difference he was determined to make. As he looked out the window at the setting sun, he felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. The world might always have its opinions, but for the first time, Barron understood that his legacy would be defined not by the noise, but by the lives he touched along the way.